Hello and welcome to the return of the Please Bet on Football Games podcast. I am your host, Alex, here with the on-air talent, Joe. Joe, how's it going?
It's fantastic because I finally have an opportunity to talk football, which is something I've been dying to do for like 3 weeks now.
I've seen you on Twitter. You've been talking plenty of football lately.
And I've mostly been arguing about who's stupid. I haven't really gotten to talk a lot about football or football players or games. So this is refreshing. This will be a nice change of pace.
Good. I'm glad. I'm happy to be back. It's a summer return. Weather's nice. The podcast is back. Football's coming up. I'm excited.
We got 8 weeks and there are 8 divisions. This sets up perfectly.
It's almost like we planned it.
It's almost like I put this in my calendar a month ago.
Hell yeah. Well, you want to talk some football?
Let's talk some football.
All right. To start off this off-season review, we're going to go division by division. First up, we're going to look at the AFC South, and we're going to go reverse order of win totals. And that means first up, we are looking at the Tennessee Titans with a win total of, I believe, 6.5, though I think it started at 5.5.
Yep.
So this is the team expected to be at the basement of the division. Joe, what do you think about that?
I'm very high on the Titans. Now, I don't know if I think they're going to win the division because it is a tough division, but I think the Titans are going to really surprise a lot of people. So in my power rankings, I have my algorithm power rankings, which is just I grade all the position groups. I have a formula that weights all of them. It spits out numbers. I generally think they're pretty decent, but I want to tweak them. The algorithm thinks they're 9th. I think that's a little high. I have them at 13. Either way, that's a hell of a lot better than a 6.5 win team.
Yeah, I think you told me you might have a little bit of money down on this already.
Yeah, so my biggest future of the offseason is I got on, before the draft even, I got on Tennessee over 5.5. And I also alt-lined it at over 6.5. So if the Titans win 7 games, I'm going to be a very well-paid boy. But we're getting ahead of ourselves because we should talk about why I'm so high on them.
You want to start with a little bit of offense talk, or you want to get into off-season additions? What are you thinking?
Let's talk offense, and we can work the off-season additions in as we go through the roster. Starting off number 1, not a player. We're already breaking the rules, but the biggest thing they did was get Callahan as their line coach. Not the head coach, Bill Callahan, the line coach. Because the reason this team sucked last year was they had the worst bottom 3 offensive line in football. You could argue the Giants, you could argue maybe the Panthers, but it was bad. And Bill Callahan is just a wizard. I mean, you are very familiar with your familiarity with the Browns. I don't want to call it fandom anymore, but you are the Browns whisperer. And he turned that offensive line from a liability into a strength, like immediately.
It was insane how quickly he turned it from the Hugh Jackson and partially Greg Williams days, where it was terrible. I remember it was like Baker's first and second year where he was just running around like crazy. And then they brought him in with Stefanski, and the O-line completely turned around. Like, yeah, they got some guys got a little better and they made some additions, but that run game went from bad to one of the best in the league.
Yeah.
And he turned guys that were late round picks or really raw into playable starters.
Well, we think of like Wyatt Teller as an all-pro guard. Wyatt Teller was nothing. And Bill Callahan just picked him out of a crowd and was like, I think I can do something with him, and turned him into a savant starter. Like Ethan Pocic was a journeyman backup. Now he's a top flight center.
Yeah, he's good. And I think he also just has a great feel for the run game. Like he was the run game coordinator in Cleveland the last few years, where Stefanski would talk about if it's a run play or I'm even just stuck on like what to do, he goes and talks to Bill Callahan and is like, hey, what are you thinking? Who should we look at or whatever? Because he's just got such a good mind for football and, the run game in general.
Yeah.
So I think he's going to be huge. Plus, I think the head coach is pretty good too, even though we still haven't talked about any players.
Well, part of what I think is going to be so exciting about the Titans is that basically their entire offensive line is brand new. So they got Cushenberry from the Broncos, good center, like maybe not like a Jason Kelsey caliber center, but that tier below, like a top 10 center for sure. And JC Latham, their first round pick, I didn't love him, but if Bill Callahan decides he loves him, there's probably something to it. And even if he was a bad pick, Bill Callahan will turn him into average at least. So those are two brand new additions. Additionally, I didn't know this. Peter Skoronski had like appendicitis and an appendectomy right before the season last year. He played the entire season like 30 to 40 pounds underweight.
Really? That's insane.
Well, once you get into the season, it's hard to like change your body. And he was, he lost all that weight because he was sick and then he couldn't eat and then surgery. So he was just super underweight and like weak the entire season. And he still played okay in a really tough scenario. So I'm very excited about what that entire left side of the offensive line is going to look like. And then this is where some projection takes place, right? Because they've got a position battle at right guard and a position battle at right tackle. And the options are questionable. So at right guard, they've got Sadiq Charles, who they just brought in from Washington. He sucked, but he is athletic, but he sucked. Battling with him is Dylan Radins, who's their second round pick from a few years ago, a North Dakota State guy. He has not played well. Discouraging. Additionally, at right tackle, it's Nicholas Petit-Frere, former Buckeye, who arguably the worst tackle in football last year. The only competition for him would have been Andre Dillard, the guy who lined up across from him in Tennessee. So it's not good. Additionally, the Titans signed Daniel Brunskill out of San Francisco, who's a perfectly solid average player. I think he'll probably be the right guard if Radins or Charles doesn't pop. But, okay, Radins, Charles, and Petit-Frere, all three of them are not guys you want starting, but they're all awesome athletes. Like, they're really, really raw athletic dudes who were good in college. So, like, there's something there. If anybody's ever going to turn them into something, I think Bill Callahan can.
Yeah, I agree. Like, that's what he specialized in. Even if you look at the last few years with Cleveland, Wyatt Teller got there a little bit before Callahan did.
Yeah.
But he went from kind of promising athletic player to one of the best guards in the league under Callahan. You had the guy out of Ohio State last year, DeJuan Jones.
Mm-hmm. DeJuan Jones.
That, he was very good at Ohio State too, but there was a lot of raw talent involved. And by the end of the year, I think he played like half the season, most of the season even, where he was very good. And I think Callahan should get a lot of credit there. Even, what's his name, James Hudson, that guy didn't know how to play tackle at all.
He was literally a defensive lineman.
Yeah. And, he's not great, but you can put him out there and he can play.
A defensive lineman from the group of five should not be a serviceable offensive tackle in the NFL. And Bill Callahan made that happen because he was fast.
Yeah, because there are athletic guys that have the attitude to them. And so if they have that, it's like he can teach the technique and the mental side of it, or at least improve it a lot. So I think that bodes well, especially because they never really had a strong line. And granted, they haven't had a ton of talent on that offensive line for a while. But I have to think they weren't getting great coaching, because like guys would go there that were decent or had some promise or something and then just be bad.
Or like look at Jack Conklin, who was on Tennessee, underperformed, streaky, underperforming player, went to Cleveland, got with Bill Callahan, cleaned his game up entirely, became a really good tackle.
Yeah, so I think that's another reason to be excited. Now, granted, that right side of the line still scares the shit out of me because like there's only so much you can do in one off season. But I think it gives reason for optimism that their line is going to be better than maybe we think, even just looking at them going, oh, this guy's decent. These two kind of suck. These two could be good. So I think we should expect them to be a little bit better than maybe they even look.
Yeah.
just because I think we get the bump from Callahan, but you're going from negative to positive instead of just, kind of a nothing to positive.
True. So, I mean, if just to go through it quickly one more time, J.C. Latham will be a solid tackle on the left side. Peter Skoronski will be a solid guard or better on the left side. And then the right tackle will probably be an issue, but at right guard, worst case scenario, you're going to end up starting Daniel Brunskill, who's fine. We've seen him in San Francisco be fine. Best case scenario, one of Radons or Charles pops in camp, and all of a sudden, you've got a legitimately good offensive line with 4 real starters. Either way, I give it a B. This is a fine offensive line now, which is a huge upgrade from being a fucking disaster.
Yeah, I think that there's reason for optimism, and I think that Callahan will keep it so that the floor doesn't completely fall out. They'll be competent in the worst case.
And then, that leads us to the skill position players. How do you feel about Tony Pollard and Tyjae Spears?
I mean, I know that Tony Pollard is falling off a little bit. He's hurt, getting older, but he's still a good running back.
Yeah.
And I like Tyjae Spears. I think he serves a role. He's good in that role of being kind of like that scat back that you can throw stuff to that's going to go get outside of the tackles a little bit. So I don't think it's like the best running back room, but I think it's a pretty solid one.
See, I fucking love Tyjae Spears. I would be surprised if Tyjae Spears isn't their number 1 running back. I think Tony Pollard is going to get a lot of run as a wide receiver, which is what he played a lot of in college. But I think that this running back group will be better. I know this is sacrilege. I think it'll be better than last year's with an old Derrick Henry. Because if you just look at the stats, like Tyjae Spears outproduced Derrick Henry last year in the same offense on the same team. So I think getting Spears the ball more and then adding that out of the backfield element with the pass catching and the route running that maybe Derrick Henry didn't necessarily have. I'm only giving him a B plus on running back, but I'm really excited about what this duo can be. But
and they made some additions at wide receiver too.
That I was about to say. I think I'm about done talking about running back. Wide receiver is much more interesting. It's going to be DeAndre Hopkins at X, Calvin Ridley at Y or Z, either way. And then Tyler Boyd's going to be in the slot. I don't think Treylon Burks is going to fucking play.
I think they'll get him in some, they'll give him looks.
I don't know if he makes the team.
He'll make the team. They drafted him in the first round last year.
2 years ago, different GM.
Was it 2 years ago? Damn, time flies.
It was when I lived in New York.
Because they traded A.J. Brown, and he's been there for 2 years.
I remember getting remarkably frustrated that Treylon Burks was drafted in the first round because he said he was 6'4", ran a 4.3, and had gigantic hands. And then he came to the combine and measured at 6'1", ran a 4.5, and had small hands. And everybody was like, well, but we were already imprinted with the idea that he was a freak. So we'll just continue believing that with no evidence that displays it.
Yeah, I think he'll still make it this year. I think this is probably his last chance, though.
Yeah. But then, he's going to have to beat out Nick Westbrook-Ikine and Kyle Phillips, both of whom have proven like they're consummate depth receivers. I don't think he can. But regardless, the depth doesn't matter. All that really matters is those big 3 and then a little bit of Tony Pollard playing out of the backfield or splitting out wide. I don't love any of these 3 receivers. Like, I think all of them are a little overrated, but they're all much better than what Will Levis was dealing with last year. Like, DeAndre Hopkins is not the old DeAndre Hopkins. He's the old DeAndre Hopkins. But instead of being doubled every play because he's the only receiver worth a damn, now you have to pay attention to Calvin Ridley. Now you have to pay attention to Tyler Boyd a little bit. It pulls the defense apart a little, and they've kind of got a guy who can do everything. Like, Hopkins is going to be your deep threat ball winner. Ridley is going to be your intermediate level route runner with a little bit of speed to go deep. And then Tyler Boyd's just crafty with excellent hands. They have a guy who fills each niche, and they're all solid players. And then their tight end sucks. I hate Chigakonkwo. I think he is a shitty version of Jonnu Smith, which is a little bit of helmet scouting, but not that much.
Yeah, it's a good room. It's not a great room, but exactly like you were talking about, they kind of fill all the needs or the types of players that you're looking for to have a well-balanced passing attack. So I think it's a good room. It doesn't have a ton of depth, but it has a little bit, and it will give Levis a lot of options. I'm not super high on Chigakonkwo either. He's athletic. So there's some room that, you're always waiting on those guys to figure it out a little bit. But yeah, he hasn't really impressed me to this point either. But you have four legitimate options you can throw to if you include Pollard. So I think it's a much improved and pretty solid group of playmakers to pass to.
Yeah, so like we'll get to Will Levis in a moment because he's the piece de resistance. He's the complete X factor. But already we have an offensive line in 2023. It was a terrible offensive line, it was a bad receiving room. It had one player worth a damn and then a bunch of really bad starters and then a similar running back crew. Now we've got so we've gone from bad to solid on O-line, bad to solid at receiver. We've stayed pretty good at running back, although I guess you don't get the fanfare and the hype of Derrick Henry, but everything around the offense, every piece of the offense has improved. I think it's the most improved team in the NFL.
Yeah, I mean, they did a ton of work. They signed a bunch of people. They, improved the coaching staff.
Listen,
it should be a much better offense. And honestly, it might even be like a legitimately good offense.
I loved John Robinson, and I lamented when he was fired a year ago. Like, I think on this podcast, we complained that like the Titans are going to get run into the ground. They fired their brilliant GM. They're sticking with their meathead, run the ball, dumbass head coach. They're doing everything wrong. And a year later, turns out the GM they replaced John Robinson with is another top flight GM. And they didn't stick with the meathead dumbass. They got a new, exciting offensive head coach. And they were smart enough to stick it out with Will Levis, which is our last point on the offensive side of the ball. I'm very excited about what Will Levis can and should be this year. So coming out of Kentucky, I was excited about Will Levis. I had him as the best quarterback in that draft. I stand by that. Going through the season, CJ Stroud garnered a lot of hype, and we'll talk a lot more about him later. But when I went back and watched the film this summer, because that's every summer I finish watching all the games I missed during the regular season because they weren't interesting enough or I was just watching other games instead. I've graded every snap of every quarterback in this division from 2023. Will Levis was clearly the best one, in my opinion. And it was a small sample size because it was only 8 or 9 games, but with the terrible surroundings, bad play calling against teams that are just outclassing them every week, Will Levis was dragging this corpse of a team to the finish line, beating teams they had no business hanging with.
All right, so tell me what are his keys to success this season? What's a perfect season look like for him? And then also tell me what can go wrong or what might he fall into that will lead to a bad season for him?
Okay, so the fears with Will Levis are going to sound a little familiar because he's kind of just Josh Allen. One, he's late on reads often and kind of sometimes you think it might even be on purpose because he just trusts his arm so much, and it is that good. Got a really quick release and a really strong arm. So he'll throw late, and sometimes that leads to difficult catches, sometimes it leads to batted balls, and occasionally it even leads to interceptable balls. The disaster scenario is that doesn't improve. His mentals are just what they are, and he is a reckless, bad decision maker. The dream scenario, if everything pans out properly, if the coaching is good and he's receptive of it, if he figures out the NFL a little bit, I think that this can be like statistically a top 8 season, like top 8 like as far as yardage goes, over 4,000. As far as touchdowns go, over 30. I legitimately think he can be a Pro Bowler this year if he is what I think he could be, and the offensive coaching is as good as what we've seen in Cincinnati the last few years. But the sky's really the limit. I think that this is a very good scenario for him. What makes Will Levis special as a quarterback is his deep ball is ridiculous, and this is going to sound completely counterintuitive because so many people have said the exact opposite thing, but he's really, really accurate. If we were just putting targets out there on golf carts, he'd be the best, one of the best in the NFL in terms of being able to hit the target. He runs into problems with the late reads, and he runs into problems because, especially last year, the Titans only threw on 3rd and long. So he's trying to do ridiculously hard things, like throw a 25-yard dig into cover 3 or cover 4. Like, it's not going to work, but he made it work way more often than you would expect. So I'm high on. Now, I don't think Will Levis is going to be a superstar. I don't think he's a top 5 quarterback. I think he can produce like one because of the scenario he's in, but I think that Will Levis is a B caliber, good quarterback.
Okay, I mean, he's definitely the X factor for this team because, I have not watched as much film as you on him, but the takeaway that I have from the games I have watched are that he can make any throw. He is super similar to Josh Allen. He's not going to run quite as well, but he's got a cannon. He can make insane throws, but he seems like from time to time he's trying to play hero ball or he's trying to, make something happen. Some of that I'm sure was because of the team and the situations that he was throwing in last year. But I worry that he's going to be a guy that, yeah, he might throw 30 touchdowns, but he might also have 25 picks and really handicap your team with turnovers and bad decisions. I'm more optimistic because, the offense is in a much better situation than it was last year, but you still never know with a young quarterback that has had, processing issues up to this point with a lot of turnover, a completely new coaching staff, a lot of new receivers, a lot of new offensive linemen, a new running back that he's going to have to hit the ground running for him to be prepared and ready to face the NFL defenses. So I am concerned about him, but I agree with you that it's about as good of a situation as he can be put into as a young player on a team that, is somewhat rebuilding or retooling, I guess. So it's going to be exciting. I'm really looking forward to watching him play because he's just a fun player because there's a lot of action, but the offense should be professional and has the chance to be really good.
Yeah, so I have this team in tier 4, which is, so tier 1 is like 49ers and Chiefs. They're great. We know it. There's nothing to worry about. Tier 2 is really good teams who absolutely could contend for a Super Bowl. And then tier 3 is teams who I think will certainly make the playoffs. Tier 4 is they could be better than tier 3, but I don't trust it as much. This is a top of tier 4 team for me. And it's largely because this offense, if Will Levis is a backup caliber quarterback, it's like a B offense. It's okay. If Will Levis is good, like I think he is, it's an A- offense. This is a sick offense. You average it out, it's probably a B+. It's a good offense. And a lot of that comes from, I also don't know what the coaching is going to be. Like Brian Callahan does come from Cincinnati, and he has said everything I've ever wanted a coach to say in the offseason. He talks about the running game isn't as important. You got to throw the ball to win. It's about throwing downfield, throwing past the sticks. He wants to, the offense is going to run through Will Levis. You got to go deep. You can't just throw dinks and dunks all day. You have to really go for the throat. And that's what we saw in Cincinnati that made that offense so special. Like before Jamar Chase and T. Higgins popped, people would make fun of Zach Taylor's offense because they're like, oh, they just run 4 verts all the time. And then once you get good receivers who go win balls that they shouldn't, like it's like, oh, sick. They run 4 verts all the time. So I expect we'll see a lot of that from Tennessee. They've got the personnel to do it. It just really comes down to Levis. I think that the O could explode. And thank God we no longer have Mike Vrabel punting from the plus 40 to terrorize us. Should we move to the defense?
Yeah.
Dude, I think this defense could be the best in the NFL. So
they're incredibly talented, and adding Algerius Sneed is huge.
Yes. This is my favorite corner in the NFL right now. And they got him for a third. And then they also signed Chido Awuzie, who's serially underrated as a good corner.
Yeah, his biggest issue is just staying healthy, but he's good.
We're getting ahead of ourselves because the centerpiece of this defense, I believe, is still the defensive line.
Absolutely. When you have Jeffrey Simmons and Harold Landry.
Aaron Donald's gone. Jeffrey Simmons is the best defensive tackle in football. Like, it's weird to say a name that's not Aaron Donald or even J.J. Watt as the best defensive tackle in football, but the throne has been vacated. It is now Big Jeff atop the throne. Harold Landry is sick. He is healthy. I understand that kind of that's an oxymoron. He is awesome at football, and now he's healthy again. I wish that they had kept a second defensive end who I like. They did get Arden Key. He's he's one of those guys that Twitter loves to talk about, like Arden Key figured it out. He's actually sick. And then you watch him and you're like, he's just an undersized defensive tackle who gets pressures, but they're kind of gimmicky and it's not really him dominating so much as it's just he was around. So he's a serviceable defensive end. You put him across from Harold Landry, you got a good pair. But this is a Baltimore Ravens style defense, man. I forget his name. He's new. Denard Wilson was the secondary coach for the Ravens last year, and he runs that exotic Mike McDonald defense. So it's going to be a 3-4, and their 3 down linemen are going to be Jeff Simmons, Tavondre Sweat, the second-round pick out of Texas, who I really like, freak athlete, and Sebastian Joseph Day, a solid, consummate pro defensive tackle. So that's 3 really good defensive tackles. And then your edges are going to be Harold Landry standing up, which is where he should be as an edge, and Arden Key, which is fine. That's 5 fine or better defensive linemen. That's fierce. Like, and 2 of those dudes are elite in my book. So how do you handle them?
Try and get the ball out quick.
Exactly. Well, here's the problem with trying to get the ball out quick. We move to the secondary. Algerius Sneed is the best press corner in the NFL. Chido Awuzie is a very good press corner. Roger McCreary is the best press nickel in the NFL for my money. And then you've got really good ball hawking, mobile safeties in Amani Hooker and Elijah Molden, both of whom can play corner. Like, they can play man coverage. They're just playing safety because this is a sick, deep secondary. And Denard Wilson has even come out and said, we're going to press dudes at the line. We're going to rush the passer, and we're not going to give you short passes. Thank you. The first coach on defense in like 10 years to say, oh yeah, the easy solution when we rush you is to throw short. So if we rush you and don't let you throw short, you're fucked. Galaxy brain. So I love what I'm hearing from the defensive coordinator. I love his pedigree. I love everything I've heard about him. And I love the way that they have philosophically built this defense. And I love the personnel on the front 5, I guess, and the back 7. The linebackers, saying they give me pause would be a bit of an understatement. I fucking don't like them, but luckily that does matter the least. And we have seen for a while now that this Ravens style 3-4 defense makes life really easy on linebackers. Like, we saw Patrick Queen not get exposed despite sucking. We saw Roquan Smith have a bit of a resurgence when arriving in Baltimore. It houses them very nicely and makes their jobs simple. And Kenneth Murray is a dumbass, and he does get lost in space. But he is a freak athlete, and he does flash good play. So if you're going to house him, like if you have to start Kenneth Murray, house him in a 3-4, keep his lanes very small and descript and distinct, and let him run around and chase dudes with the ball. That's the best you can do for him. Jack Gibbons, I don't fucking know. I liked Cedric Gray out of A&M in the draft, but he's a rookie linebacker, and I don't expect him to play. The linebackers are the weakness. How are you going to attack them, though? Because you're going to get pressed at the line, so you can't run slants, and you can't run through Jeffrey Simmons, Tavondre Sweat, and Sebastian Joseph Day. So I don't think it matters.
Yeah, hope you have an elite tight end.
Yeah, well, God forbid, now Amani Hooker is probably manning up on him.
Yeah, I mean, there are obviously ways to match him up with linebackers and get into looks that you get them, but yeah, it's tough when the D-line is elite and the secondary is elite and very deep. Like, yeah, the linebackers are bad, but everyone else is really good. So I agree with you. This defense should be very good again. They're going to get after the quarterback. They're going to be able to stop the run pretty well. And fuck, is it going to be hard to pass on them.
Yeah. Oh, another first-round pick that might get cut is Caleb Farley. They've actually talked about trying him at linebacker or edge.
That's insane.
Well, he's 6'4" and fast, but he can't cover or be in space. I think edge might save his career.
Doesn't he have like a brittle spine or something too?
Brittle is a word for it. I would say thrice broken. He fucking broke his spine multiple times and is playing NFL football. Well, he's not playing, but he's trying to play NFL football.
Yeah, I don't see how putting him on the line so he's getting hit by guys that outweigh him by 80 pounds will really lessen that issue.
Could you imagine, though, how fun it would be as a 200-pound cornerback for people to just be like, listen, you got to gain 50 pounds in the next 8 months. Eat up. Dude, the amount of ice cream I would crush, dude. Oh, every day it would be Creamwich and burgers, and it would be glorious. I did that my first year in law school, and I got big.
Was it glorious?
Yeah, it was really glorious until I had to stop eating for like 6 months to get rid of it. Don't try that at home. I did eat, just less. Overall, I'm sky high on this Tennessee team. Like, let's say we're a degree wrong on everything. Let's say the defense isn't elite. It's just good. Let's say Will Levis isn't really good. He's just okay, like a backup Jacoby Brissett level quarterback. You're still looking at a 500 team.
Absolutely.
Like, that's the over. So this is going to be one of my primary gas teams that I will be hammering all year. I don't know if I like Tennessee to win the division because, as I said, it's a tough division. You've got 4 serious teams, but they definitely have the best value to win the division, and I think it's squarely within the realm of possibility.
Absolutely. I agree. I mean, they definitely have a lower floor than, say, the Texans. But really, probably the Jags.
Any of these teams, because the other 3 teams are all basically the same as they were last year or a little better.
I think the Colts also could, because I think Anthony Richardson will be fine. But I think there is a world where he can't read a defense at all. And a lot of stuff that he got lucky on or whatever last year won't play, and he'll have a really rough year. So I think they could have a low floor as well, but definitely the Jags and the Texans.
You've led me. We have to talk about the Colts now.
I think that's natural.
All right. Their season win total is 8.5. Same as the Jags. Tough division. In my power rankings, my algorithm has them at 27, and I have them at 24. That's a fucking under. I don't think that the Colts are very good, but they did almost make the playoffs with Gardner Minshew, so we got to be careful. Offensive line, really good. They're returning like all their starters, and I can't imagine Quilton Nelson's going to continue to suck. So I give it a B+. Bernard Ryman, I love him. I think he's only going to continue to improve. I think it's like his 5th year playing NFL or American football because he's from Germany. Ryan Kelly's a consummate center. Will Freeze and Braden Smith are okay on the right side, but I think they'll be fine. It's a solid B+ to B offensive line. Jonathan Taylor is Jonathan Taylor. We don't have any hot takes about him, do we?
No, very good.
He's sick. That's an A. The receivers, this might surprise you. This is an A- receiving group, despite the fact they do not have a tight end. Michael Pittman's a solid wide receiver 1 or a great wide receiver 2. Josh Downs is a really good slot, fast, quick, catches the ball well, great route runner. We like Alec Pierce, but he hasn't really put it together. He's still fast and tall, but he does have drops that make you want to scream. Well, now they have A.D. Mitchell, who was my wide receiver 2 in the fucking class. Apparently, A.D. Mitchell's psycho. Apparently, he's diabetic, and when he doesn't have sugar, he gets cranky. Give him fucking lollipops, dude. I don't care. Just keep the man happy. He's a freak. I love his game.
Yeah, that story about like Texas had to have someone that would like keep track of his blood sugar for him or something. Yeah, you're in the NFL. Hire someone.
Yeah, like that's why they have quality control coaches who make $20,000 a year. They can track his blood pressure and blood sugar.
All you do is walk around with a bag of Skittles and be like, "Hey, AD, take a test for me."
Yeah, like AD, eat a Snickers. You're not an elite receiver when you're hungry.
Yeah.
So that's 4 receivers that I'm like stoked about, plus Jonathan Taylor, who's obviously amazing. Add in that Shane Steichen, top 8 play caller in the NFL, is calling your plays, and he's running a West Coast offense a spread West Coast offense that isn't as popular anymore. Everybody's doing Shanahan stuff. There's like 3 dudes running the Andy Reid West Coast spread. This is one of them. It's something that you won't see a lot of. I think that's an advantage. So the offense is cherried. The question is, can Anthony Richardson play football? To this point, at no time has anybody ever said Anthony Richardson was good in that game. The best that anybody's ever said for Anthony Richardson is like, he can be good one day, but he was terrible at Florida. His stats reflected it. He was not good in Indy in his first 4 games this year. His stats didn't reflect it because all they did was throw screens and flats, but there's a reason the team got a lot better when Gardner fucking Minshew started. So I think Anthony Richardson's bad. I have a C- grade on him. I think he's the worst quarterback in this division by a landslide. I think he was a mistake to take in the first round, much less at 4. But if I'm wrong, this team could easily win the division or at least have a sick offense.
Yeah, I mean, he's a little bit of that Josh Allen mold too, in that He's a freak athlete.
Yep.
Even playing poorly last season as a thrower, some of those runs he pulled off were insane. And he still has a cannon that theoretically he can throw anywhere. It's just, he can't really read a defense.
He can't read a defense, and that throw could legitimately go anywhere.
Exactly. So he is the epitome of like a boomer bust prospect. I think that's a good coaching.
We did just describe Felipe Franks. I want that to be clear.
A little bit, but...
And Terrell Pryor.
Sure. But then also you go to the Josh Allen thing. And since Josh Allen worked out, everyone's a little bit more like, well, maybe. And teams have found ways to succeed with running quarterbacks in the regular season, at least, and shelter those guys. And they have enough playmakers and a good offensive play caller that they can make it easy for him. So I can definitely see an avenue where he has a really successful season and looks pretty good on top of having some crazy highlight plays.
Yeah.
But yeah, he also might have a bunch of crazy highlight plays followed by a bunch of crazy highlight plays for the other team's defense.
Yeah.
So he's like even more of an unknown than Will Levis is, where Levis could be very good or he could be like kind of middling, whereas Anthony Richardson might be elite, but he also might be unplayable.
Yeah, I think that is perfectly described. He could be a true saboteur. So overall, considering the sick receivers, the sick running back, the good offensive line, the giant question mark at quarterback, the good offensive play caller, I give this offense a B plus, just because everything in the world can't help you if your quarterback is just a fucking disaster. And it's one thing to be a lesser, so like I'm low on Jalen Hurts, but you can't argue that Jalen Hurts isn't smart. Like if you give Jalen Hurts enough time, he will always make the right decision. Anthony Richardson's a completely different kind of player. Like Anthony Richardson might be one of the worst processors in the entire NFL. Anthony Richardson might make the wrong decision given all the time in the world. Even if he makes the right decision, he might not be accurate enough to make the throw. So there is no mitigating that. Like, yes, Shane Steichen's brilliant, but there's no way around, like, I don't know where this ball is going to fucking go. And that's why I give the offense a B to B plus when it is so stacked around the quarterback. I think that this is the best. Like, God forbid Anthony Richardson busts this time next year. This would be the number one destination for any free agent or rookie quarterback, kind of like the Vikings were this year. The defense is easily the worst in the division and maybe bottom 5 in the NFL for my money. Their defensive tackles are sick. If we want to start there, like Grover Stewart and DeForest Buckner is a dynamic duo, but I don't think that having really good defensive tackles matters that much. Like, you'll be stout against the run, but those guys aren't really rushing the passer. And then I like Liatu Latu. He's a solid defensive end. He's not like a game breaker. He's not a special player. And then Kwity Paye is Jamal Adams. Yes, Jamal Adams, the safety, is the same as Kwity Paye, the defensive end. Like, they're the same size and they have the same play style. It's not good. So their defensive line is iffy, and that's easily the best part of their team on defense because their secondary is penis in the negative sense. Juju Brents stinks. Julian Blackmon is okay. Nick Cross is slightly better than okay. Jalen Jones, not the good one, is not good. And then Kenny Moore is a solid slot corner, like a good, solid slot, but not special. And also, it's a slot corner. I don't know how they stop anybody.
Yeah, their best players are at non-premium positions.
Yeah. And Gus Bradley's just going to run cover 3, and they're not going to get pressure, and you're going to eat them up with short passes all goddamn day. And oh, by the way, you play in a division with Jacksonville and Houston running, well, and to a certain extent, Tennessee running offenses specifically geared to destroy cover 3. So good luck. So yeah, we've got an offense with a question mark at quarterback and a defense with question marks everywhere except for defensive tackle. I think that they'll be a solid team, and I don't think the difference between the 24th best team and the 13th best team is gigantic, but I think that Indianapolis is squarely the worst team in this division.
Yeah, we kind of skipped over the linebackers, but they're not good.
Zaire Franklin, EJ Speed, and I guess that's it. They're not moving any needles. Like, they're good run defenders. I kind of like Zaire Franklin, but I don't love them, and they're still linebackers.
Yeah, I think this defense, they might be able to stop the run. The last handful of years, they've been pretty good stopping the run, but they're not going to be able to stop anyone that throws the ball well.
Exactly. And they're,
So,
they're in a passing division.
yeah. So I think they're going to have a rough year. I do like Steichen a lot, and I think he did a great job with that team last year where they weren't that talented then either. So I wouldn't be shocked if their record is still solid. But in terms of matching up against the teams in this division, and, given that it's such a strong division, I don't expect them to be anywhere near a playoff picture.
Yeah, and I'm looking to fade them against the spread too, just because people are going to look at it and think, look, I mean, this team almost made the playoffs with Gardner Minshew. Anthony Richardson can't be as bad as Gardner Minshew. Well, first of all, he certainly can. And second of all, like I mentioned earlier, there are different kinds of bad. Like Gardner Minshew has no arm talent or athleticism, but he's really smart. Like if you could plop Gardner Minshew's mind into Anthony Richardson's body, that's the best quarterback of all time. But you can't, and that's not how it works. And smart quarterbacks like Gardner Minshew can operate a well-schemed offense better than remarkably talented quarterbacks who maybe don't understand how to play the position, like an Anthony Richardson.
Exactly. And when you have a good play caller with good weapons, I mean, we've seen it in San Francisco, your quarterback doesn't need to be that good. They just need to be able to operate the offense and deliver the ball on time. So that's where Gardner Minshew can be so successful with a team like that, because Steichen makes it easy and he has multiple options to throw to that can make something happen.
We saw it perfectly at Steichen's last stop in Philadelphia. Jalen Hurts doesn't have a big arm, not the most accurate, not even the fastest, really strong, but not the fastest. He operated that offense well because if given lots of time, and that offensive line certainly gave him lots of time, he always makes the right decision eventually. And I don't think that Anthony Richardson thinks like that.
Yeah, he's like the other side of the quarterback of, he's not going to make the decision a lot of the time, but even when he makes the wrong decision, sometimes it'll still work out.
Yep. He's the Josh Allen.
Yeah, exactly. All right. I think that's all I have to say about the Colts. Yeah, let's move on to Jacksonville. All right, Jacksonville. Next up, I think you said the win-loss was 8.5.
Yep.
For their win total. Again, this team is pretty similar. Gave out big money to their now franchise quarterback, whether he is or isn't talent-wise, he is salary-wise. So
the fact of the matter is they're not moving on from Trevor Lawrence in any time soon.
Yeah. So what do we think?
Remember a calendar year ago when the Jaguars were the slam dunk of all the 8 divisions to easily win their division? Like everybody knew Jacksonville was winning this division. It was, and then they did not win the division. And it's largely, I hate to say it, it's because of 2 things. It's because this team last year was ridiculously mistake prone, just like fumbles for no reason in the worst possible times, terrible turnover luck, 4th down gaffes where like Trevor Lawrence would just fall down and make an inaccurate throw because he's slipping. Like just ridiculous stuff that really isn't all their fault. But when you can't overcome bad luck as such a heavy favorite in such a weak division, when, Tennessee had no line and they lost their quote unquote starting quarterback halfway through the year. Indianapolis lost their starter week 4 and had to start Gardner Minshew. The Texans were like the youngest possible team and they still couldn't put it together. I don't love the offensive line. I don't think that their tackles are very good. I think they're okay. Like Cam Robinson and Anton Harrison, mediocre, I think. And then Ezra Cleveland, who they brought in, and Brandon Scherf, that's an excellent guard combo with Mitch Morse, a solid center. So their interior will be solid, if not great. Their tackles will be okay at best. So I give their offensive line a B-.
I think that's fair. I agree with you. I really like Ezra Cleveland.
Yeah.
Brandon Scherf is
the athleticism they have at guard now is stupid.
Yeah, I think it definitely helps open up that offense because, we're about to get into the playmakers, but I like the playmakers, or at least they're versatile and you can do a lot with them. Theoretically, you give them the ball in space and they're going to do a lot. They just got Brian Thomas Jr. into an already pretty solid playmaker room.
Okay, before we get to the receivers, how do you feel? First of all, they got Dern Johnson, the homie Earn.
Oh, yeah. I saw that.
I didn't know that.
He's fine.
Yeah, no, I know, but it's cool that he's there. They also got Mac Jones. That's important.
How?
Make sure that everybody's good and liquored up before the game. How do you feel about Travis Etienne?
I don't think he's anything special. I feel like he could get replaced in the draft pretty easily.
I love Travis Etienne.
Really?
I really love Travis Etienne. I don't love him as much as I love Jonathan Taylor, but I have him as like an A- back just because he's so good out of the backfield. I fucking love his.
He is incredible out of the backfield, but I feel like he's more of like as a 3-down back, he's fine.
Well, you can't run him up the middle, really.
Yeah.
But I think that's why it's so important that their guards are athletic, because now you can pull them and you can get everything outside.
Yeah. I just worry about their ability to run up the middle because Dearness Johnson isn't really a guy that's running up the middle either.
Well, that's where Tank Bigsby comes in. And Tank Bigsby, I saw a fun fucking montage a couple weeks ago. Tank Bigsby had 4 targets in the passing game last season. 3 of them were drops. 2 of those drops turned into interceptions, and the one that he caught, he fumbled. So if you throw the ball at Tank Bigsby, the other team's getting the ball.
I'm going to be honest, I don't really know who Tank Bigsby is. However, based off of his name and the little bit you just told me, he's 6 foot and 255 pounds.
I would say 245. He was a tandem back at Auburn. So he's listed at 6 foot 213. If he's 6 foot 213, I'm 120. He's a hefty boy. He earned the Tank's not his real name. That was given to him.
I kind of assumed.
You got to be careful with these Alabama guys. But so they can run up the middle, but like it's telegraphed. If Tank Bigsby comes in the game, your cornerbacks are now playing linebacker.
Right.
So the run game is not, they have a niche. There's a thing they can do well, and that's get Travis Etienne the ball on a stretch or some kind of veer. The receivers, you seem higher on the receivers than I am. It's a B for me, a B plus if you include Evan Ingram, the tight end. I like Evan Ingram. He's a great receiving tight end. He can't block. He won't try, but he's a big slot. I love Christian Kirk. I was like the only person on the planet when he got signed by the Jaguars. Everybody's like, what a terrible contract. He's not even good. And I'm like, no, he's really good. He just has a terrible quarterback. And then Christian Kirk's mom liked my tweet and DM'd me and was like, I'm so glad somebody understands. And I'm like, I understand. Well, which is fun because Christian Kirk has played with Kyler Murray for like 7 years at that point and still thinks he sucks, but we'll do the AFC or NFC West later. So Christian Kirk and Evan Ingram, I love, but they're both slot restricted. Like they're not really playing outside. Gabe Davis is the definition of mid, and Brian Thomas Jr. There's a lot to love, but he's the least polished you could be. And I don't love his hands. Like he doesn't catch the ball above his head. Like if the ball is above his shoulders, it's just not getting caught. And his route tree is super limited, but he is big and super fast and remarkably quick for his height.
Yeah, and I mean, I think receivers, you can teach them the route running. There have been plenty of athletic freaks that have learned the route running. Now, there have been plenty that haven't been able to as well. But a guy that's been this successful, that was drafted high, that I'm assuming they did some sort of interview process with him. Now, who knows? Because
never overestimate the NFL's ability to not do their job.
Sure. But so I'm going to give him the benefit of the doubt that he'll be able to polish a little bit. And he's such a freak. And you have an ability to move guys around a little bit and get him the ball in a creative way because you can have ETN moving around and creating openings. And you have a pass-catching tight end. So I think that they'll be able to be creative and get him the ball and just let him go crazy. So I'm probably higher on him than you are for that reason, though the drops is a problem because I feel like that doesn't really get taught out of a guy. They either have it or they don't.
He's not like Quentin Johnston level drops, but like it's concerning. It's difficult because compared to this class of wide receivers, Brian Thomas is good, not great. But compared to a lot of classes, he would still be like a top 10 pick. So it's what he does extremely well. And that is be athletic and long and just throw him. If you just throw him, if you run him on a streak and you have Gabe Davis run some kind of possession crossing route, and then Christian Kirk and Evan Ingram can cut you up underneath, that's a lot to work with. You're probably right. As a receiving group, this is like an A- B+, if only because there's so many options.
Right, because both your tight end and your running back are very good in the receiving game. Then you have Christian Kirk, who's a really good slot. Brian Thomas Jr., who should be good, and at the very least gives you that athletic freak that you can get him the ball in screens and those like jet sweep type deals where
you can use them on clear outs just to get rid of defenders.
Yeah, and just chuck the ball up to him 40 yards downfield. Like, see what happens. And then Gabe Davis, like, again, he's not anything special, but as a fourth option,
yeah, he'll always be where he's supposed to be.
Exactly. So I think that it's a good receiving room with a chance to be really good if Brian Thomas Jr. hits.
Yeah, if Brian Thomas pops, all of a sudden that's a sick room.
Yeah.
And who's to say? I mean, 2 years ago, we didn't know jack shit about Brian Thomas. And then last year, he was tearing up the SEC. So he could just be a late bloomer who's about to learn everything and make us look dumb for doubting his route running and savvy. The quarterback. When do we expect Trevor Lawrence to have to play football well? Because it hasn't happened since he was 18.
I mean, I feel like we've said it for the last couple of years, but this year, does his contract start this year or does it start next year? Do you know?
I think it starts next year, but it's guaranteed. Like, the money's coming in. Right.
But I feel like if you have one more year where he's only making, I mean, he was the first overall pick, so he's still probably making like $18 million this year. But you can swallow another like developmental year a little bit better. But man, if you're paying him $50 million a year and he's what he was last season, you're pissed. Because then that's when your window starts closing because all your money's allocated to your quarterback.
So Trevor Lawrence does the hard things pretty well. Like, his intermediate ball, pretty good. Like, he'll make some throws where it's like, fuck, dude, a handful of starters can make that throw. So, like, there are reasons to be excited, and I see them. But the mistakes, the inaccuracy, the deep ball, it leaves a lot to be desired. And okay, so I graded him again. I've graded each snap that Trevor Lawrence has taken in his basically since his sophomore year at Clemson, except for the rookie year with Urban Meyer, because that should not count. Like, Urban Meyer defines saboteur.
Absolutely. I think that's a fair picture to take of Trevor Lawrence and get rid of that outlier.
Yeah, like, just it's not even worth considering a little bit with Cowboy Fingerbang running the show. The guy fumbles a ton. He makes bad decisions. He's wildly inconsistent with his accuracy, considering what I've seen him do. Like, no, he's not scattershot like Anthony Richardson, but like, I've seen this man throw a perfect dig 20 yards down the field or like a rail to the back of the end zone perfectly. I've seen it. And then the next play, I'll see him just ground a fucking slant. And it's like, dude, how? His throwing motion is kind of slow. Everything about him just kind of looks like sluggish, like almost like his head's not in it. Like, there's no intensity or urgency to his game. I think Trevor Lawrence is a fine quarterback. I think he's like a B-. I think he's slightly worse than what I believe Will Levis is and will be. So by no means am I trying to say like Trevor Lawrence is a problem. I think he's better than like a Dak Prescott, but he's my quarterback 10 out of necessity just because it's not a great quarterback era right now. Now, the rookies may change that. Caleb Williams, JJ McCarthy, and Drake May could totally change that, in my opinion, and knock him down to like 15. But I'm not super impressed with Trevor Lawrence, and I think that honestly, particularly, he's a bad fit for this offense that's predicated on quick passing and great accuracy, because he's got the slow release and lumbering footwork, and he never is quick to make his decisions. So overall, I think the offense is like a B+, because I think that Doug Peterson is a good play calling coach, but I don't think that the hype matches the reality on the field. Like,
yeah, I think that's fair to say to this point. I mean, yeah, he's flashed. He's had stretches where he's played really good football, but he's had way too many stretches where he plays bad football. I mean, he's had a ton of games where he'll have one half that's incredible, but the other half is terrible. It's like he just has to reach that next level where he can have a consistent standard that you expect. Like, all right, even if he's not having a 400-yard, 4-touchdown game, we still know that he's going to have 250 and a couple touchdowns and under 2 turnovers.
Yeah.
But he doesn't have that yet, where he still has too many stinkers or too many games where he is kind of a saboteur. So we'll see. I mean, the team's probably a little better than they were last year.
Well, defensively, that D-line is sick.
Yeah, I mean, we can move into the defense because that is a lot better. I mean, the offense is pretty similar to how it was last year. I mean, The coaching is the same. Most of the players are the same. So it's kind of just is it going to be this year that it clicks for him?
Yeah, they basically swapped out Brian Thomas and Calvin Ridley, which Calvin Ridley's a good player. Like, you hope that that's an even swap. You're probably not upgrading there. And then Gabe Davis for Zay Jones, which is a slight upgrade.
Yeah, the line got better.
Line got a little better. Ezra Cleveland is nice. Mitch Morse is big upgrade from Brandon Linder.
But yeah, let's talk about the defense, because this defense is much improved and could make it easier on the offense.
Yeah, so Trayvon Walker is easy to dunk on because he never should have been the first overall pick. Like, it never should have even been considered. I thought I was high on him in that draft, and I was like, he could be a top 10 pick for sure. And Jaguars took him first, and I was like, no, not that top 10. That was a huge mistake, and it always was. But he's still solid. Like, he's a really good run defender, and he's mediocre as a pass rusher, which is fine. It's not what you want out of a first overall pick, but he's a starter. And then Josh Allen is dope. Eric Armstead is dope. Roy Robertson Harris is solid. So you've got two solid starters and two dope starters. It's a B+ defensive line for me. I like it. I'm impressed.
Yeah, I think that's going to be the strength of the defense.
The secondary is a fucking it's craps. Like, okay, we know Tyson Campbell's pretty good. Ronald Darby sometimes is good, sometimes is bad, sometimes is okay. And
he's fucking old too.
I was gonna say, he's only getting older. I mean, he was a veteran at FSU when Jameis was there. So the dude's older than Jameis. Like, yeah, Marcus Mariota is out of the NFL basically for age reasons because his body's falling apart, and he's younger than Ronald Darby.
Yeah, I mean, Ronald Darby, he's played for a lot of teams now.
Everybody.
Like, he's played Buffalo, Denver, Washington, Baltimore.
Well, he's been every caliber of corner too. He's been an elite corner. He's been a terrible corner. He's been everything in between. So like, I don't know what you're gonna get. What's that?
Was he in New England?
No, I don't think so. But he's been, I would guess, by the law of averages, Ronald Darby will be solid or fine. Andre Sisco, I like at free safety, but then strong safety is either Andrew Wingard, who, God bless his soul, is the first one in, last one out, tries real hard. Dad was a coach, is a slow white guy who's smart and tries hard. And then Antonio Johnson, who I don't think is any good. So they're fucked at strong safety. Darnell Savage, the former safety for Green Bay, is going to apparently be their slot corner. I don't love that. He's coming off a terrible season, and now he's being asked to do something more difficult than what he did in Green Bay. So their secondary is full of question marks. I give it like a B to B-. And then their linebackers suck. Devin Lloyd, I know, is supposed to be good. He was a 23-year-old rookie out of Utah. I've never seen a man so confused by space, by like the existence of matter and creation in his periphery. Like, he's 26 now, I think, or no, he's 25, and he can't put it together mentally. That's a bad sign. So I don't know how Devin Lloyd ever stops being a complete liability in the passing game. And then Foye Oluokun is good against the run, but he's just too slow in the pass game. And if both of your linebackers are super vulnerable to the pass, and your strong safety is vulnerable to the pass, and your slot corner is a reformed safety who wasn't very good last year at safety, I know how I'm fucking attacking you with slants and tight end patterns. Like, you're going to get torn up over the middle. And then, God forbid, Ronald Darby is not, playing to the best of his abilities. Now you're double fucked. So I could see this defense really being an issue. Now they got a new defensive coordinator, Ryan Nielsen, from the Falcons last year, which means they're going to run a ton of man.
They don't have the horses.
Exactly. Like, I believe in man defense. Man defense works when you have the men. Like, we see it in basketball all the time. You don't play man defense on LeBron. You cannot do it. So I can see a lot of ways that this defense goes sideways. I give it a B- overall because I do like Ryan Nielsen. I think he's clever. I do think Tyson Campbell's a good cornerback. I do think the defensive line is very solid, and Josh Allen can wreck a game if you let him. But there's just too many ways that I can attack this defense.
Yeah, I think it's definitely improved, and having that strong of a D line will raise the floor and make it a lot easier on that weaker secondary. But look, a lot of things need to go right for that defense to be anything above, like, hopefully they don't kill us.
One reprieve I will grant them is that it's harder for Devin Lloyd to get lost in space if he's playing man coverage as opposed to lots of cover 3 like they did last year. But the downside is that if he does get lost, you're just so fucked. Like, I don't know if I want to put more pressure on him to play well because I haven't really seen him do it. Yeah. So I think Tennessee is clearly better than Jacksonville, but I think Indianapolis could be anything from terrible to better than even Tennessee. The only thing I'm certain of is Houston will be good.
Yeah, I think, they won the division last year. It's time to talk about them.
Okay. The Titans win total is 6.5. Jacksonville and Indy are both at 8.5. Guess what Houston is?
10.5?
9.5.
Okay.
So even Vegas is like, it's a crazy tough division to handicap, except we know the Titans will suck. Where Vegas was wrong. So both my algorithm and my handmade power rankings have Houston at 8. They're a good team. There's no hole. There's no weak spot.
Just crazy how different it is from this time last year.
Yeah, I didn't expect to feel this way, but good job, Nick Caserio. I really thought he was going to fuck up this whole roster, and he cleared my expectations dramatically. He did a really good job. Shall we start with the offensive line? This is the weakest part of the team, but when you get Shaq Mason, a good fucking guard for a 6th-round pick because Tampa Bay is putting firecrackers up their ass for some reason, it'll jumpstart your rebuild. Here's the problem. Shaq Mason, really good. Laramie Tunsil, elite. Love him. Everything else, penis, in the pejorative sense. Titus Howard is fighting tooth and nail to retain his starting job. His competition is Kendrick Green, a swing tackle from Pittsburgh last year. That's not good. Remember, this is a Pittsburgh team that replaced their starting left tackle this offseason, so it's not like they had depth to burn. Charlie Heck is also in the conversation. His name's Heck and you haven't heard of him. That's a bad sign. And then Kenyon Green, the guard out of A&M, was a bust. And I didn't really get it when the pick was made, and I certainly don't get it now. So add in the fact that Laramie Tunsil's got injury problems. He's getting older. It's like a C plus B minus line for me. It's just passable. If they lose Shaq Mason or Laramie Tunsil, this could quickly become a line bad enough to ruin your game plan.
Yeah, absolutely. They don't have a ton of depth, and even the starters aren't very good. It's kind of 2 real good linemen and then a bunch of dudes that you're crossing your fingers for.
Yeah, but after that, okay, Joe Mixon is a solid running back, and Dameon Pierce was once highly regarded. So solid running backs. The receivers, holy shit. So
it's deep.
Nico Collins is sneaky a top 10 receiver. I know a lot of casuals want to point to CJ Stroud arriving and be like, no, that's why his stats are big now. And it's just CJ Stroud. No, Nico Collins is pound for pound the quickest receiver in the NFL. He is 6'4", probably 230, built like a fucking defensive end, and he can stop on a dime. And his acceleration is his burst is nuts. So he's a special receiver. He's a top 10 receiver, and he's young, and he can do everything. He can run the routes because he is so bouncy, and he's big and fast. So you can just send him on a streak and say, fuck it, go be a bigger, better human than him. And then Stephon Diggs, yes, he has lost a step, but we were talking about him as a top 10 receiver 2 years ago. He hasn't fallen off a cliff. He's just rolling down the hill. So that 1-2 is dope. And then assuming Tank Dell is healthy, whereas Nico Collins might be the pound for pound quickest, Tank Dell is the quickest. Just extreme explosive, tiny, but his route running is great. His ball skills are really good. The man can play football, so that you're 3 deep with studs. And then your depth is Robert Woods, Noah Brown, John Mechie. That's stupid. Those guys would start on some teams, 10 teams. So the receivers are insane. And then Dalton Schultz is a good, solid tight end. Brevin Jordan's a good yak tight end, like a Jonnu Smith type. The options in the pass game are ridiculous. And you've got Bobby Slowick, who will be a head coach in 8 months, running the show like his last name is Shanahan.
Yeah, I mean, even last year when Tank Dell and Nico Collins were, the primary options and were both young, unproven receivers, they were insane. Well, now you have another year where they're, more comfortable in the offense. Everybody's more familiar with each other. And you add Stephon Diggs and a bunch of depth. It's crazy. He's going to be able to throw to 5 different guys on any play.
Well, and their offense was good when Tank Dell got hurt, and it was basically just Nico Collins and Robert Woods. Now this is a really, really loaded team with a good offensive coordinator, an offensive line that you pray can just hold together a little bit, and then the quarterback.
Yeah. I mean, the benefit of having Bobby Slowick and all those playmakers is it's built to get the ball out quick. So your offensive line being shittier doesn't impact you as much. So it's like they're kind of built for what they're doing. And again, credit to Nick Caserio that they should be successful even with a weaker offensive line.
Yeah.
Assuming CJ Stroud, which we can get into right now, has a season similar to last year.
Yeah, like offensive line aside, I think CJ Stroud is legitimately the weakest link on this offense. And that's saying a lot. That's saying a lot about the offense. It's saying a lot about CJ Stroud, and it's saying a lot about my perception of both. So I've seen CJ Stroud ranked by like reputable analysts as high as the third or fourth best quarterback in the NFL. Not like the third most valuable because he's young and on a rookie contract, but like best. That's fucking insane to me and has no basis in a reality I've ever experienced or even heard of. That being said, I think CJ Stroud is better than I thought he would be. So I thought he would be good at executing a system. Ding, ding, ding. He executed Bobby Slowick. I didn't know Bobby Slowick would be like this, but I said CJ Stroud will be the best at executing a system of these rookie quarterbacks. He executed a great system. I thought it was going to be Frank Reich's system, threw me a curveball, ended up with a better system. He also got a lot better at handling pressure in college at Ohio State. Like if there was even not a free rusher, but like a rusher breaking free, like starting to uncover himself, CJ Stroud couldn't hit a barn. The broad side, the narrow side doesn't matter. The roof, he wasn't hitting the barn. In his rookie year, he overcompensated a little bit. Like he would bail out of pockets he didn't need to. He'd run for no reason while throwing, but he became much, much better at handling that out of structure stuff.
Yeah, that was the biggest read I had on him because Ohio State, so I watched him more than I did a lot of the other top flight quarterbacks. And that was always my thing is like he could do everything pretty well. He was relatively smart and careful with the ball. But anytime he got pressured, it seemed like he just completely panicked. And that was the biggest criticism that I think we both had on him was that once he's got, NFL pass rushers coming after him and those complex defenses, shit's going to get a lot harder and you're going to be under pressure a lot. So him being able to handle that as well as he did, because he did handle it pretty damn well last year, bodes well for him and is why I think he's a lot better than we expected him to be. Now, he's probably still a little overrated because he's got a little bit of the Joe Burrow syndrome where it's like, okay, operate the system and don't fuck up and everyone's going to think you're incredible. But he was a lot better than I expected. And I definitely think that like he's a legitimate, solid starting quarterback. Like,
yeah, definitely.
There's not a question.
Yeah. And like, that's another guy where like, it's partially just because I don't think that the NFL's got really good quarterbacks right now, but he's top 12. Like he's fringe top 10 to me, right below Trevor Lawrence, right in that group. But I think one thing that really gets overlooked with him, remember in the middle of the season when people are like, CJ Stroud hasn't thrown an interception in like 6 weeks. And like everybody was freaking out over how smart he was and how accurate he was. CJ Stroud's accuracy is the worst part of his game. Like, okay, charted 617 snaps over 17 games. He was accurate on 69.56% of passes, which is slightly below the league average. I've only graded 10,514 snaps from starting quarterbacks last year, so I might not have the biggest frame of reference, although I definitely the fuck do. However, that's not great. And I assume it'll get better, right? He's not going to get worse from year 1 to 2. Typically, that's the biggest jump a quarterback ever makes. But the thing that really intrigues me is that he's got this reputation as a guy who protects the ball and doesn't throw a lot of interceptable passes. However, in 17 games, he threw 20. So the man led the league in like dropped picks and fumbles that were recovered by his team. He had 29 turnover-worthy plays, which is 4.7% of his dropbacks, significantly above the league average of 4.3%. So I think that he'll have a little bit of regression to the mean as far as turnover luck goes. Like I think some of those picks will eventually get caught. He also won't be playing as easy a schedule because they won the division, so he's not playing bottom dwellers anymore. Last year, their schedule was so easy. It was all fourth place teams and the NFC South, which sucked. It'll be tougher this year, but the offense is still really good, and his weapons have gotten great. And for the knocks that I may have on him, he is a consummate starter with the talent to do just about anything in the book. Like, no, he doesn't have a killer arm, but he's got a good arm, and he's not like Lamar Jackson as a runner, but he can run. So there's nothing he can't do. There's just nothing he does special. And like, I've got a 2.4 grade on him. I think that he's a good starter. Like, listen, I wouldn't pay him the bag. I wouldn't build my franchise around him necessarily, but I am certainly not looking to replace him. And when your team is this loaded on offense with this offensive coordinator, that is plenty to easily get you to the playoffs. Now, the question is, what happens when Slowick leaves? But Bobby Slowick has decided we don't need to answer that question just yet. So for now, the offense is A-, like really.
All right, so we know the offense is going to be at the worst solid, could be very, very good. But let's move on to the defense.
Okay, this defense could be fucking sick. So we know that DeMeco Ryans is a really good defensive mind. That's why he has the head coaching job, and he will call the plays.
Right. I mean, he turned that very untalented defense into a very productive defense last year.
We also saw what happened to the 49ers when they replaced him with one of the bad defensive coordinators from the Browns, who I always get confused with a different one.
Steve Wilkes.
It was Steve Wilkes. See, I was going to say Joe Woods, but...
No, he used to be there.
I know. They were both Browns 49ers guys who run super conservative pussy defenses that I hate. They're both also defensive coordinating again this year somehow. Will Anderson is good. Now, he's not special. Like, he's not like third overall pick good, but he's good. Danielle Hunter is still good.
Somehow. He seems ageless to me.
I feel like he's been in the league for 20 years, but he's an athletic freak who's like 30 and really good. Mario Edwards, Danico Autry, and Foley Fadukasi, some combination of those three is a good defensive tackle pair. So
it's serviceable.
Yeah, their defensive line will be solid. It's not going to be sick, but it'll be good. It's like a B+. It's good. Their linebackers, I fucking love their linebackers, dude. This might be the second best linebacker core in the NFL for my money. I love Henry To'o, guy out of Alabama, just super fast, great in coverage, can't really tackle, but I've never cared. Aziz El-Shaair, sick. He also knows the system. He's a 49ers guy, despite playing in Tennessee last year. And then Christian Harris, who a fast Alabama linebacker who's great in coverage. I fucking love him. So DeMeco Ryans, a fast Alabama linebacker, who defensive coordinated in San Francisco, has built a linebacking core of fast Alabama linebackers and 49ers. I love it. I think that the possibilities with them running a lot of cover 3 the way he does are fantastic. And then the questions are in the secondary. Is Desmond King alive? Can you play slot corner at 49 years old?
We're going to find out.
Yeah. Kamari Lassiter. Does being able to change directions or move laterally matter for cornerbacks? We'll find out. Kamari Lassiter doesn't. Jeff Okudah. Has he ever been good? The answer is no. Can he start now because he was once drafted high? The answer is also no, but we're going to get affirmative proof for the 8th consecutive year.
I can't believe he's not playing safety.
I can't believe he's playing. Derek Stingley is good. Will he ever live up to like top 5 pick caliber good? Probably not. Jimmy Ward is okay, but he is smart and knows the system. And then Jalen Petrie, I really like, but he's never put it together the way I thought he would to this point. So we know they have a good corner, and the rest is literally anywhere from fucking terrible to pretty good. The caliber of this secondary will determine exactly how good this defense is.
Sure, but I think with how strong the edges and the linebackers are, it's going to help cover up some of those deficiencies they have in the secondary. And with DeMeco Ryans and the system they run that already, protects the corners a little bit. So I think that the weakness in the secondary won't be that pronounced, and this defense is going to be good.
Yeah, I mean, like, Kamari Lassiter he's not fast per se. Like, he's a big dude with good ball skills, but he's not an athlete. But that doesn't matter that much. Like, it matters the least it possibly could when you run a cover 3 defense. Like, his job is get deep. Like, Richard Sherman was slow. Richard Sherman was not agile. He was just long and smart. So you couldn't beat him over the top. And that's all you need to do in a cover 3. So they will house their secondary well. I have the defense at a B plus because I think the front seven is dope, but the secondary, man, the secondary could be worse than the Colts. It could. But on the other hand, Desmond King could continue to just be an ageless wonder who's really good in the slot. Petrie could blossom. Jimmy Ward could have a solid season, and Kamari Lassiter can be not a problem. And all of a sudden, where's the weakness? On the entire roster, where's the weakness? So this is a top 10 team. They're a playoff team. I think they're the best team in the division, although I think Tennessee has upside to surpass them.
Yeah, but I think day one, they're the best team in the division.
Yeah.
And they're the one that I feel most comfortable that, if they don't win 13 games, which I think would be high, but they're going to win 10.
Yeah, I think that you could very legitimately bet the over 9.5 without being an insane person.
Yeah, I think again, their schedule is going to be tougher. I think a lot of quarterbacks, they do have a little bit of that sophomore slump, at least to start the year.
Well, and people are going to at some point, somebody's going to figure out how to stop the cookie cutter Shanahan offense. And I think Mike McDonald actually figured it out.
I was about to say McDonald is probably the closest we've seen to this point.
And Tennessee's defensive coordinator is his protege.
Yeah, I think it's going to be a really fun season for this division just because they're all pretty close and they're all good.
Absolutely. No, I'm very excited about this division. I think it's going to be one of the most fun to watch. And dude, Tennessee runs the defense that is closest to stopping the Shanahan offense, which is what Houston runs. So you've got these matchups that are so perfect. We get to see the clashes of the philosophical titans, no pun intended.
Yeah. And you have a bunch of highly drafted young quarterbacks that all of them have very high ceilings.
Yeah.
So there's room to have really good football.
Yeah.
In a division that typically is kind of ugly.
Yeah, the jerseys are still bad, but
a lot of how many Thursday night Jacksonville Jaguars Tennessee Titans games have there been?
I literally made the statement I did because I was imagining those all gold Jaguars uniforms they wore when we were in college versus the all baby blue bastardization of the Titans uniforms.
Yeah, that was disgusting.
Yeah. Or the all red Texans uniforms that made no sense.
But those days are gone. It's going to be good football with a lot of excitement and action. Do we want to go and pick over under for all four teams to wrap it up?
To close it out, we should pick over under for each of the four teams and then make our favorite bet of the division on the win totals.
Okay. I think Texans are going to win the division. I think their ceiling is the highest. I think maybe Tennessee could be up there, but I think I'm most comfortable saying they have the highest ceiling, and I think they have the highest floor as well. So I think they're going to win the division. Maybe Tennessee fights with them, but they're one. I think Tennessee is two. I think they're going to be really good. And then, I don't know. The Jags and the Colts are both kind of in between. I don't know because they're both at 8.5, right?
Yeah.
So I don't know. I feel like
over for both of the first two.
Yeah, those are both over. I think they're 9.5 is low for the Texans.
Mm-hmm.
I get it with a second team, the second year for a lot of these players, but I think they go over. Tennessee definitely over. That's my favorite bet of the group now. We don't really need to hold it in suspense. Yeah. It's pretty obvious. And then Colts and Jags, I don't know. I want to say the Jags will go over and the Colts will go under. That's my gut.
Me too.
But just because the Jags have more certainty to that team.
They're also playing a fourth place schedule.
Yeah.
A third.
Peterson isn't an elite coach, but I think he's a little bit Jeff Fisher-ish, where he's going to get your team to about 500. You're always going to have a decent season with him. It's just, I don't know how many incredible seasons you have with him. So I feel like they're going to be solid, just over 500, sure.
Yeah, I go same. I think despite my Tennessee optimism, I do think Houston's the best team in the division just because what's the fucking hole? What's the weakness? The secondary? Maybe. The line, if some injuries happen. The quarterback, if you want to be a real jerk about it, maybe. Tennessee, I think they have the highest ceiling. I really do. I think that Will Levis in this offense could be a world beater. It might be, like, it very well now, but the problem is I don't know exactly what the offense is going to look like. However, it is absolutely on the table, in my opinion, that this is the best combination of offensive coordinator and quarterback in the NFL this year. Now, it's a low bar. Most of the great quarterbacks have terrible coaches. I guess I can't say it because I forgot Mahomes and Reed. They're like clearly the best.
Yeah.
But you've got the best coach of all time with arguably the best quarterback in the NFL right now. I don't think that we'll get to that when we do AFC West, but it can be a really special combo with a good roster and a great defense, and nobody's expecting it. I have Indy at the bottom because if I'm really going to stand on my convictions and like tell you what I fucking think, because nobody came to this podcast to hear what Joe thinks ESPN would tell you. My personal opinion is Anthony Richardson fucking sucks, and he's never shown you at any level that he doesn't suck compared to his fucking competition at that level. And if Anthony Richardson continues to suck, this is a bottom 10 team. Now, Anthony Richardson could do something completely unforeseen, but I haven't seen it on film. And that's where I get my fucking opinions. So I think the Colts are under for sure. I think Jacksonville goes over, but I could be surprised. Like they're gonna be right on that 8.5 line. If you tell me they win 9 games or 8 games, I'm not gonna blink. I do think they're the third best team in this division, though I also think they're probably a wild card team because they're just too solid not to be. And they do have, I think, is it a second or third place schedule? Regardless, I see this division very similarly to how it actually shook out last year with the substitution of Tennessee where Indianapolis was as far as record goes. So yeah, best bet of the division, arguably best bet of the offseason, Tennessee over 6.5. Cha-ching. Got anything else?
We should keep track of that for the bets on the year.
Oh, we should. Well, let's do that.
Because that should be like, I'm comfortable with making that an official pod pick.
Do we put this
for
on
a
the
future?
Page?
Huh?
Should I put it on the page?
Yeah, why not?
Yeah, smart. I'll do that. Cool. That'll be on the page. And if you watched all the way to the end of this very long podcast, you'll get it for free. That all we got?
I think so.
All right. So for the first edition of the Reborn PBFG podcast, tail or fail, all we ask is that you please bet on football games. Asta.